Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of SKILLSeries Live. We're here again with Dr. Mark Merriweather Vorderbruggen. This time though, we're not talking wild edibles. We are getting into some ham radio stuff. If you're tuning in on our website, there's a little chat bubble down in the corner. That is not where you interact with us. You need to be watching on the Facebook or YouTube live links. And any chat there will come through to us. We can share them up and answer questions, interact, do all sorts of fun stuff. So, cool. Let's kick this off. Anybody that doesn't know Mark, you better go back and watch the first episode if you want to hear more about it. He does all sorts of cool stuff. Mostly and most importantly for us, he's co-designer of the Foraging Bandana. And he's actually the lead medicine man for the Medicine Man Plant Company, which is coming soon to Amazon. So stay tuned for more information on that so that you can get some cool, wild, medicinal products. Mark, take it away.
All right, cool. Lots to cover tonight, people. So what we're going to look at, like Nick mentioned, was ham radio. And so I want to talk about first what ham radio is not. Then I want to talk a little bit about why you might consider getting your ham radio license. And then we'll actually talk about the basics, the things you need to know to get the license and how they work. Lots to cover because the subject is somewhat complicated, but not as hard as you may think, and definitely not as hard as it used to be or as expensive as it used to be. So let's start with what is or what isn't ham radio. And so it is not the walkie-talkies you had as a kid. It is not CB radio. Ham radio is using much more powerful radios with much greater range. And also because of their power and the ability to interfere with other electronic equipment, they have very specific bands where you are allowed to use and broadcast the radios. And also these bands are also separated by the specific license you get, at what level of ham radio operator you are. But to put things in perspective, your basic walkie-talkie or even your family radio, the things they got out now, the FRS and the GMRS type stuff, those might be up to 2 watts of power. CB radios will be 4 to 12 watts of power, so not even really a light bulb. Ham radios, your own ham radio can go up to 1,500
Holy cow.
of power. So we're talking, microwave. These are ones, the 1,500 watt ones are not ones you hold up to your ear and talk into, because you will burn a hole through your brain, which limits, the government's ability to tax you, I guess. So it's because of the power and because of the capabilities. Like I said, there are very stringent rules and licensings and things like that that are needed to properly and legally operate a ham radio. Now, that being said, when I say operate, I should actually replace that with broadcast on. You can listen to ham radio all you want without any sort of license. You can get yourself a cheap ham radio and tune in, seeing what the preppers and survivalists and police and so forth are doing in your area. It's the minute you press the talk button, that's when you need the license. And I will tell you, because of past things that have happened over the years, and this goes way back to the original foundings, the FCC, they're the ones in charge of it, are constantly monitoring the ham radio waves and will track you down and bust you if you break the laws. They have people out there that's all they do all day is listen for people breaking the law on ham radio.
How do they track you down?
So it's interesting. They use what's called triangulation. So they'll have several vans out with directional antennas, and they'll figure where the strongest signal is from 3 different vans in the center of that line where those lines intersect. It's just compass. It's orienteering, really.
Okay, and I'm going to chime in here again. What is the correct, hopefully non-offensive name to call ham radio people?
I like Mark or Merriweather, but no, it's it's ham operators, amateur radio operators. Those are the things. Radio operators.
Okay, because we got
It's
some
never
other
come up before, Nick.
I don't know if you saw. Well, I wasn't the ham heads, or I don't know what you call them, but
No.
we've got other people already chiming in here with their call signs.
Oh, cool.
Teal from Naked and Afraid. If nobody knows Teal, I didn't even realize she was a ham person.
Heck yeah, Teal. I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Tom Bowman.
Yeah.
Oh, and Teal says we just call them hams. She says, can we get the call sign in this QRL? I don't know what that means. QRL.
QRL, the request submit. So I am KI5BOG. So that is what. So when you pass the test, and I'll get into the test in a little bit, you are assigned a call sign. It's like every radio station. You know, if you think WKRP in Cincinnati, you know, that's their call sign. In my case, it's KI5BOG or KISSBOG, which I kind of like, actually. Makes me think like, you know, a Swamp Thing with Adrian Bardou. Ooh. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me rewind a bit and continue on my outline so I don't get lost. So the next thing I want to talk about is why ham radio. Whoop, it's all Nick.
That's me. You want to see me? You want to see this one? All right.
Oh, okay, this is fine. So the main reason for ham radio is just another form of communication. The stated goal of the overall ham radio society, the reason the ham radio option was created by the world's governments, is to promote and advance radio technology. So a lot of, well, the world is filled with mad scientists, and not all of them work for big names, you know, Motorola, things like that. Has always been a history, especially in radio, of people experimenting and trying out new things and pushing the boundaries and connecting two different technologies like computers and radios together, to the point where the government's decided, you know what, these people know what they're doing. Let's give them some play areas where, you know, they can try this stuff and not interfere with CBS or NBC or, you know, the different radio stations and things like that. And this was decided over 100 years ago, and the result has been some really amazing technologies. But for the average ham radio operator, it's about communication. And if you are a news junkie, if you want to know what's going on around you, ham radio is an excellent source of the sort of things you don't hear on the news. Now, me personally, I had always been interested in ham radio. Growing up and everything, I'd read about it, and it looked really cool, talking to people all over the world, things like that. Neat. But the cost of ham radio gear used to be really expensive, and the test requirements to get your license were quite hard. The cost has dropped dramatically, and the test requirements, the skill requirements have also dropped dramatically. So that was no longer a barrier. So I kept thinking, I want to do this, I want to do this. Well, I work at a Red Cross shelter, and I was there during Hurricane Ike and during Hurricane Harvey. During Hurricane Ike, all our communications were knocked out. The cell phones, the radios, all that were down because of the severity of the storm. The shelter was designed to hold 100 clients, you know, people coming in to use the shelter. We ended up with 300. And no good way of talking back to the main Red Cross headquarters and things like that. And so that's really where it brought it home that if I had had the ham radio license and operation, I could have still been in contact with the main Red Cross headquarters downtown. So after Hurricane Ike, I did get my license. Fast forward to Harvey, where it came in handy with Harvey. I was actually working at the shelter, but Harvey, from a shelter point of view, wasn't as needed this time. But where my ability and a lot of other Houston ham radio operators came into play was on the roads, reporting back into TransStar and the Department of Transportation, TxDOT, what roads were flooding, how high they were flooding, if there were cars trapped in that flooding, things like that. So being live, you know, broadcasting, this road is flooded, that road is flooded, and then hearing the other ham radios letting in on that. So really handy there. Also, there's the organization called Skywarn. And Skywarn are the amateur trained meteorologists, ham radio operators that when storm cells start forming, they're out looking for, visually spotting tornadoes, bad lightning, things like that, and reporting into the U.S. the weather, U.S. government weather people.
That's awesome. I didn't know that there was and that's all just volunteer stuff, right?
Yeah, you do have to go through special training. The Skywarn training, it's actually pretty intense. They teach you how to read clouds, determine what clouds are doing, and weather and wind and safety and all this stuff. It's really, really neat. I have not done it yet because it's actually a fairly large commitment, because once you go through that training, they hope then that, first the training it's like a month long, several times a week training of all the weather type stuff.
Yeah,
So
Eric, they used to use them for storm spotting for CERT, and it was through the CERT organization. I swear there was a class called Skyward, and it was probably 6 or 8 years ago that I went through the CERT class. But they had talked about some sort of a weather reading class there, and it might be more.
And so,
people.
yeah, and so once and like I say, if you're just listening, you can tune into that too, without needing a license. It's once you hit the talk button, that's when you need the license. So, keeping abreast of what's going on. Most of the little, even the handheld and the desktop radios, both can usually tap into the local, police dispatch, like a police scanner would. And so I also on mine, I keep track of what's going on with the Houston or Harris County dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
So just a side note, violent crime is up in Houston. It's like stabbing, beating, shooting, stabbing. A lot is going on there. So
it was years ago when we were going to go out and do a hunting trip together, and to come out on the property, we needed a radio.
Yeah.
So I picked this one up, and I had a friend, I guess, program it. And so to do something like that, like you're saying, to listen to local stations, you can just Google, right? You can just get on there and say Harris County Sheriff Department, what frequency, and then
And I will talk about that, where you get the frequencies and so forth. So, but the other thing, especially in urban areas where there's a lot of ham radio operators, you'll quickly find there is a community of ham radio operators. Most of them have mobile units with voice-activated microphones, so they will be chatting during the commute a lot. Back when I was, living here in the north side and commuting an hour and a half down to the south side, every morning and every evening there was a lot of chatter going on with the different people, and I will say a lot of them have kind of a preparedness bent to them. So there was a lot of discussion about not just ham radios. There's kind of a joke that ham radio is the hobby where you use your hobby to talk to other people about your hobby. So, but there's a lot more, especially nowadays. There's a lot going on, especially, again, I'm in Houston. So there's a lot of update. If there are protests or things like that going on, there are a number of people who have their ham radio set up in their office looking down over different streets and so forth that will say, hey, you probably want to avoid such and such a street.
All right.
Also things like parades and races, the MS-150, the big bike race from Houston to Austin, they have ham radio operators all along it to offer support and emergency services and so forth. So once you become a ham radio operator, you can just talk to people, or you can get involved with specific organizations that either do volunteer work, like I said, at parades, at sporting events, at all sorts of big events where they need a lot of communication, or you can get involved in organizations that are specifically for doing the emergency connection type stuff. So there's a lot of things you can do with it, but it's about communication.
So we got a noob question here from Austin. He said, do you need a ham radio in order to listen to ham radio channels?
Okay, yeah. So the ham radio channels, they are above and beyond the normal radio station. So you do, well, you know what? I didn't even think of this. There are online radio stations. If you want to Google one quick, just ham radio online, and it will bring up, ham radios that are connected to the internet where you can play around with the dial and tune it in to, whatever you want. It's really cool. So you can listen to, the ham radio talk. So you don't even need a ham radio. You just need an internet connection.
Oh, be darn. Okay. And then, so the other thing, and not to be confused, if you're just looking at the radios, from my very basic understanding, there's FRS and GMRS, which are set bands.
Right.
And FRS is kind of like the family radio.
Yeah, it's the walkie-talkie.
Yeah. And so they're just kind of preset. They got 19 channels or something, and you can pick one of those channels and go. GMRS is kind of the same, but then there's also GMRS that'll go up to a 5-watt power, I think, that you're supposed to then have special permission to go that high.
I think actually technically all GRMS needs
a
special license. Yeah, it's like $30 a year.
Yeah.
People use them illegally, but it's a little less. They don't have the range or the power.
And then this is blowing my mind. So being able to send text messages from a handheld, so you can actually text from a ham radio as well.
Yeah,
call from a ham radio too.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things you can do with it. I haven't done the text, and you can also, if you're out in the boonies and you get a hold of some other ham radio operator and say, oh, hey, call my wife, let her know an alligator bit me, but I'm fine. I might just be a little delayed in getting home, things like that.
That's super cool, man.
And it used to be there were certain repeaters, if you know, and I'll explain what a repeater is in a bit, where you could tap into the phone and you could make a phone call from your radio.
I remember it as a child. My grandfather was a ham operator, but he was a extra class. And anyways, I remember as a child riding in the car in like the late 80s. He used his radio in the car to call my grandmother.
Oh, cool.
That was like the craziest thing.
Yep. So a little side note. So the handhelds, they go up, 15 watts or so. The ones in the cars can go up to like 500 watts. You have to be really careful where you put the antenna and the line for the antenna, because at that power, you can start interfering with the computer system of your vehicle. One of the guys on the Houston net, he was talking, he installed it. He moved his antenna from the back of his Jeep to the front of his Jeep. And the first time he pressed the play or the talk button, his Jeep accelerated uncontrollably.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And at first he thought it was something going, eventually through playing around, he realized it was the signal from his ham radio, the really high power signal was screwing up the electronics, and he had to move it to another location. So if you read a lot of the owner's manuals of modern vehicles, they will warn you to have the CB radios and the ham radios professionally installed. And the first time you hit talk, just do it someplace safe.
Oh man, I'm glad you said
play
that.
around with her. So something to keep in mind. All right. So let's jump into the basics of radio and ham radio to help you understand what the limitations are and try and maybe help you understand some of the things you've heard about talking all over the world and things like that. So radio waves are what are called electromagnetic waves. They do this through the air. And that's what you need to know about electromagnetic waves. The thing is they travel in a straight line, and that's good. I mean, it would be weird if they could travel in a curved line, but I'm going to try and do this backwards. So the Earth is round.
Ish.
Okay. Oblate spheroid.
Flat Earth, man.
And so there's a little dude, and if he's broadcasting,
He's just about to disprove flat Earth right now.
Yep. And so the radio wave, you know what? That's an excellent thing there. Okay, yeah. So the radio waves, they go straight. Imagine this was a straight line. So someone here might be able to pick it up. And a much bigger person down here, they're not going to get it. So regardless of the power of your radio, the electromagnetic radiation travels in a straight line. And so the curvature of the Earth, large buildings, things like that will still interfere with the communication abilities. So like the average ham radio handheld with just the antenna, 5.5, 6 feet off the ground, can still, under ideal conditions, and ideal conditions would be like on the beach talking to a boat out at sea, boat out at sea, 5 to 10 miles, depending on certain atmospheric conditions. I mean, even rain and fog can actually interfere with it some. So you're wondering then, so how are they talking to people all over the world? Is that a myth? No, it's not a myth. The reason being is, all right, I mentioned the waves go in a straight line, but there are certain bands, certain frequencies that are perfectly set up that so around the Earth, there's what's called the ionosphere. It's this dark black line that encircles the Earth. And what happens if you have certain frequencies, they hit that, and then they're reflected back. So the signal goes out, and if it's just the right frequency and things are going on with the ionosphere has to be all charged up, then it will bounce the signal rather than just continuing straight through. So, and depending on certain things, the Earth doesn't really like electromagnetic rays. So you might either bounce around, or sometimes you can even get it bouncing off the Earth and get several skips, but that's a little more rare.
Here.
So
Talk to me.
The main time when this ionosphere is most active and most able to bounce the electromagnetic waves is when it itself is all tossed and turned and kind of stormy, if you will. And what causes that is the electromagnetic ejections from sunspots. So if we go to the sun, the sunspots, those black spots, those are basically holes in the surface of the sun that's allowing more electromagnetic radiation out. So long story short, ham radio operators love it when there's a lot of sunspots on the sun, because then it's throwing out all sorts of extra energy, which is causing the ionosphere to get all energized and become really reflective to those specific ham radio frequencies.
So this doesn't like jam up the frequencies or cause interference and all sorts of other stuff?
Yeah, so that's the downside. So all the other frequencies that people use, including TV and radio and ambulances and so forth, the electromagnetic radiation coming from the sunspots can screw those up. But us ham radios, we'd want the long bounce sort of thing.
And I'm somewhat of a space nerd, but I don't know all the spheres surrounding the Earth. Is the ionosphere above or below where the communication satellites and GPS satellites?
It's below. I believe it's below. It's also one of the main areas where the northern lights appear.
Oh, nice.
If my understanding is correct.
In which case, I guess that would also then be below the space station, because they can look down on the northern lights.
Yeah.
Wow.
So would this be also, is the ionosphere, dumb question, but the Aurora Borealis, would that be the same thing or something different? Or
okay, so the Aurora Borealis is when this big wave of charged particles from the sun, usually from a sunspot or some sort of electromagnetic storm, particle storm, comes flying out of the sun, hits the Earth, follows the magnetic lines of the Earth, and converge at the, basically at the poles and the polar areas, and turns the atmosphere there into a big fluorescent light.
Got it. Okay.
So that's what's going on there. But it's also becomes very, very reflective for the ham radio. Other things that do that. So basically, if you can ionize the atmosphere, you can bounce certain frequency radio waves off it. Thunderstorms are another thing. So the lightning bolts have this brief flash of power that ionizes the atmosphere around it. And it is ham radio operators, they will look to see if there are thunderstorms. You don't want them directly over it. You want them like 100 or so miles away, way up in the sky, because You want it at a specific distance so your transmission will hit that lightning and be reflected down again.
Wow.
Wow.
Also, bouncing it off the moon
Yeah,
is another
I have
thing
heard
that
that.
people do. And that takes some special equipment, but people do that. And when I say special equipment, I mean more like pretty high-powered transmitters and pretty sensitive receivers.
Well, if you're bringing up the moon, I know ham people can talk to the space station.
Yes.
What's required to do that, and how do you set that up? Because that's cool.
Okay. You can do it with a handheld.
Okay.
And I don't have I have an antenna I made specifically for that. So there is a radio. Ooh, you know what? If you give me a second, where's my phone? Okay. There is a specific frequency that the space station has a beacon. It's constantly going. It's in the lowest the technician class, which I haven't got to, but basically anyone can hear it with the cheapest ham radio equipment. It's a very specific frequency due to Doppler shift. So the space station is moving really fast. So if it's over here sending out radio waves, the radio waves are going to be somewhat compressed as it's moving towards you. And so you have to dial up, up the frequency. So you start like half a megahertz above the frequency. And then as it flies over, you tune to that specific frequency. And then as it passes beyond, you drop down, one frequency so you can keep hearing it. And you get this beep, 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 beep sound. I actually recorded it when I did it. It's really cool. But my antenna was a wire and a large pizza pan and some old antenna cable.
That's awesome.
Nick, I think you have new hobbies.
Yep.
Right.
So talking to them, that requires them to be actively on the radio when it goes over. And it depends.
Signal regardless. If it's passing over, you can still hear this signal.
You can still hear the beacon from it.
That's cool.
But to actually talk to the astronauts, you probably need something a little more powerful than this. You probably need, like a 10-watt unit or a 20-watt unit. All astronauts have the shortwave radio license because that's part of the whole training. They get the certified in radios, and so they get the shortwave. It really depends if one of the astronauts up there at the time, if he or she is into ham radio. There have been some that spent all their spare time, looking down at the Earth and talking to people on the ham radio. I don't know about the current crew. The previous crew that was up there, they weren't very active. There were certain school events where they'd be passing over a particular area and the schools could talk to them as they came over. And you could listen. It was polite not to interrupt the school. But yeah. So
I want to talk to them.
Someday, somehow, we need to. Okay, just to go sideways for a second. So amateur radio, the ham radio operators, years ago, they realized that when NASA is sending up satellites and other payloads into space, NASA puts dummy weights in the cargo area with the satellite to balance it out, to keep everything properly balanced. And they said, well, if we could come up with a solar-powered repeater, and I'll talk about what a repeater here is in a second, that you could release in there, and we just have this repeater flowing around the Earth, and we could use that to communicate with each other. And NASA said, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. Let's see if we can make it work. So currently there's something like 18 or 19 of these ballasts, these satellite ballasts, that are actually ham radio repeaters. So let me talk about what a repeater is.
Now, when you're talking ballast, you're talking like, because the satellite's here, and then there's the dangly thing that comes down off of it. It's like a counterweight to keep it oriented in a specific direction as it rotates.
No, more like, so you got the cargo area of the rocket with the satellite. And to make sure everything is balanced, so you don't want an unbalanced rocket, they would mount weights in the cargo area. So normally then when they would be attached to the cargo area. So when it opens up, the weights stay attached to the cargo area and like burn up on reentry. Well, in this case, they are designed when that cargo opens up to release the satellite. it also releases these ballast weights that are actually solar powered repeater satellites, and they go floating off, and some manage to stay in orbit. There's been some that have been in orbit for like 30 years. Some burn up relatively quickly, but a number of universities and so forth, it's kind of an unofficial contest of who can make the most powerful, longest lasting, coolest space repeater, space satellite. And there are websites that will tell you when they'll be overhead and what range they will cover that you can use to talk to people.
See, that's so cool. That just even hearing about that, because I don't know a whole lot about the commercial space industry, but I got my training in the shuttle era where every pound, it was like something insane. Like I remember $50,000 a pound to get something into orbit. And so to even imagine that they just have this extra weight that they're just toting up for no reason.
It's not extra weight. It is replacing the dead weight that they was.
Right. I'm just saying the fact that they would even take dead weight in the first place to be replaced by something. I don't feel like they ever do that on the shuttle side of it, but commercial, I guess they just have a set rocket, and if you have extra capacity, then sure, throw in some. Yeah.
And like I said, I guess maybe it's also just the rockets are a little more wobbly or something. I don't know.
Wow.
But it's like, man, I think the first one might have been like 50 years ago when they first had this idea. So let's talk about a repeater, because that is really what makes the ham radio system so cool. So going back to our little person on Earth here, and we mentioned how, well, if I show the previous picture, the radio waves are going out straight. So if you're down here, you're not going to hear it. So what a repeater is you have a tower, and up on the top of the tower, you have a ham radio. But this is a special ham radio. What it does is it picks up a signal, so a little signal from the dude, and then it rebroadcasts it out everywhere. And because it is so much taller, it can reach farther. Because when it comes to ham radio, they mentioned it's like the radio is relatively cheap. It's the antenna that really makes the difference. The better the antenna, the better the ham radio will operate. I think there's like a scope on a rifle. You can get by with a cheap scope on a really expensive rifle, but you'd be better off with a really expensive scope on a cheap rifle. And it's the same with ham radio. You want the best antennas you can get, and you want to mount them as high as you can, because again, it's line of sight. So the repeaters, to be a little more technical, how they work is they're assigned a very specific frequency. Think of it as a very specific channel, and they have a little bit of wiggle room on either side of that channel. So if our little ham radio dude or dudette wants to use a repeater, the radio set to that specific frequency it's actually set for just a few megahertz lower, and we'll talk about that. Because this radio on the pole, what it does is you send to it at one particular frequency, and when it receives a signal of that specific frequency, it sends it out again. It repeats it, just once in pretty much real time at a slightly different frequency, so it doesn't interfere with this person broadcasting. So most ham radios now, really, even the cheap Baofeng ones, the $30 ham radios, you can program it to set, okay, when I broadcast at this specific frequency of the repeater, I want to listen at this other frequency, the frequency that the repeater is broadcasting on. So now, instead of having a 5 or 10 mile radius, you might have a 40-mile radius. There is a repeater just to the northeast of Houston that is on a 200-foot tall tower. A lot of the skyscrapers downtown Houston have repeaters on them. There are a lot of repeaters around, each with this different frequency, that will send the signals really, really far. I'm in Spring on the north side. I can easily talk to a buddy of mine up in Willis. That's about 25 miles away through a repeater, crystal clear as day. But what's really cool, so you got one repeater, but if you then put another repeater over here that is tapped into this frequency, so it will take that and repeat it. So you can end up with a big network that covers a huge area of space on Earth, really, to that you can talk to.
New question.
Yes.
So is it a single stream going to that one repeater? Basically, one person at a time can talk on that one frequency at that one repeater?
No. And that's good and bad. If two people are both broadcasting at the same time, the repeater will take in both those signals, and like the old horror movie The Fly, it will send them out as kind of a merged signal, because it can't tell they're both at the same frequency. Both people are speaking at the same frequency that's going into the repeater. The repeater just sees it as one signal. It can't tell that it's two different people talking. Mm-hmm. And it takes those and blends them together and sends them off. Hmm. So one of the things that you quickly learn,
etiquette,
taking your turn, and one person talks at a time, especially on
that was my next
repeater. And so if you hear someone talking about a train wreck, that means there were multiple people trying to talk at the same time.
If I know the frequency from my local repeater, do all the repeaters around that repeater listen to its frequency?
No, only if it's set up that
next.
So no, usually a repeater will only listen to one frequency. So it's a little more. Let me back up a little. So the people putting up these repeaters, they are usually either owned by a local ham radio club. There's a lot of different clubs that, part of the dues goes towards the purchase and maintenance of these repeaters. Oh yeah. Or it may also be like the Red Cross or certain other organizations that are, NASA actually has some repeaters that they handle on the Clear Lake facility there. I can hit that pretty easily. Sometimes you will have an organization, there'll be members across a fairly large area, and they will set up their repeaters all to listen and talk to each other. But they have to be set up that way. If you just add a repeater, it's up to the owner of the repeater as to what frequency it will run on, within some limitation. You don't want to hijack some other repeater that's being used
for a specific purpose.
So like in Texas, there's an organization of repeaters called the Saltgrass Repeater System. And they have a bunch of repeaters that are linked, down to Victoria, Galveston, Pearland, out to Austin, up to Palestine, kind of a big area. And on that, most of them, if you talk on one, you can be heard on a lot of them, not all of them, because that would really be just a constant train wreck.
Yeah.
So
theoretical question.
Yes.
What would it take from somebody like myself outside of Atlanta to speak to you all in Texas? Is it possible?
It is. And even there's a couple of ways. So the repeaters I have been describing so far are connected just by radio waves. So just line of sight sort of radio waves. There are some repeaters that are actually hooked into the internet. Echolink. Mm-hmm. Echolink. So if you tune into an Echolink repeater, that actually then gets to that repeater. That repeater transports it or transfers it across the internet to another repeater in some other part of the country or world, and you can hear that. Like over my lunch period here in Houston, I listened to the Alaska Morning Network. So they have their repeater system. A bunch of groups in Alaska have their repeaters linked and connected to the internet, and then it's broadcast by one of the repeaters here in Houston, so I can hear what's going on in the Alaska net. They have people on that calling in from Ireland, from Africa, a bunch of people from Alaska, quite a few people from Houston, because the repeaters are connected through the Echolink across the internet. So yeah, you could. It'd just be a matter of looking up which Echolink repeater we would need to talk to you. But yeah, that's very common.
Need to map it, I guess.
Yeah,
Sit down
and there are websites. And so if I can share the screen for a second.
Yep.
All right, let me.
This has been very interesting and has required a lot of questions. I apologize.
Yeah, I can believe. Okay, so if you give me the screen. Okay, so Repeater Book is the website where you go to find the repeaters. And so we have the North American Amateur Radio Repeaters.
D-Star. Okay, yeah.
Click on that. And it brings up a map. And so we'll click on Texas. Click on Texas. It's a little slow. Okay, and so this will bring up all the repeaters in Texas. So you can either look at a list of all of them. You can look at the 10 meter, the 6 meter. These are different bands that the thing uses. So with just the lowest level license, the technician level, the basic license, easiest to get, I have access to the 2 meter and the 70 centimeter bands. And I think I also have the 1 1/4 meter, but like the most of the radios, they'll only run 2, occasionally 3 bands at a time. So my radios all do the 2 meter and the 70 centimeter.
Is that measurement, is that the wavelength?
Correct.
Frequency? Okay.
Yep. So the sine wave. Okay. So, and then other classes give you expanded access to other meters. Here are all the different linked systems. Like I said, I listen to the Saltgrass, and I mainly communicate on the Saltgrass, but these are all the different linked systems. You can also say which repeaters are along I-10, which are along I-20. So if you are doing a road trip, you can pre-program your radio with these repeaters. So as you're driving, you don't have to do anything. You just, your radio will switch from repeater to repeater.
That is awesome.
So the 2 meter, so we'll click on that. So where are all the 2 meter repeaters? So this first thing here, frequency, that is the contact frequency of the repeater. The offset and the tone up, tone down, those are that slight difference in the frequency that you need to broadcast and listen on. And then where it's located, what city and what county, the particular call sign, because the repeaters, it's a radio station, so it gets a specific call sign. So you know which call sign you're using. And then this open just means, is it open to public, or do you need a special password to get to it? And
so
then
in the repeaters having a call sign, when you guys broadcast, do you have to say your call sign broadcasting on repeater call sign?
Okay. So, all right, let's talk quick about that. So one of the rules of the ham radio is when you first enter a conversation or you're first trying to make connection with someone, you give your call sign, and and then every 10 minutes or so afterwards, you're supposed to identify yourself with your call sign. I will mention that the government keeps a database of the call signs, and any ham radio operator can get in there and look at the person's call sign and then get their home address and name and stuff like that.
Wow.
So that is one thing from a security point of view you may not like.
Well, just to round that out, most people that buy any URL or website online also,
yeah,
you can go back and who is search that URL and find out way more information than any of us would like. But
yeah. So anyway, you can go through here, pick out the repeaters that are close to you. And by close, I mean like within a 40 or 50 mile of your daily travels. Program them into the computer. Like the cheapest Baofeng, I think, holds 120 different stations pre-programmed. My Yasu, it's more like 200. And then there are some, the more you want to spend, the more pre-programmed stations you can get in there.
Have they officially outlawed the 5-watt Baofangs? Like, what
Okay,
was that reason
so
that happened?
that was an issue that the Baofangs were capable of broadcasting on frequencies that people shouldn't be broadcasting on. So it wasn't a power thing, it was a frequency thing. So they have come out with new proper shortwave radio things that are limited to the specific bands that you would legally, your license would allow you to broadcast on.
Got it. Okay.
But like the Baofeng, some of the older ones could interfere with the NOAA weather channels. You know, people could broadcast on that, which is bad.
That's not cool.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
They're good little devices for $30-something too, which is crazy that they're so cheap. But
yeah. So let's are there any questions about repeaters? I mean, we could talk a lot about this. And what's nice about the repeater book is you can, oops, where is it? Once you have an account with it, and it's a free account, you can export it. And depending on your radio and the software, you can download it for your specific type of radio. And then with special computer programs and special cables, you transfer the information from your computer to your radio, or you can sit and by hand punch everything in using the little keypad, kind of like back before smartphones when you had to like hit the 5 button 3 times to get an L, sort of thing. So it's easier with the specific software. Depending on how much time we have, and it looks like we're not going to have time, we might have to have the ham radio 201.
All right.
Okay. So let's.
Dan saying the repeater book is also available as an app.
Yes.
For phones. So that's a good resource.
The nice thing, I like using it on the computer because I download it directly into the software I use for my radios. But you can at least, if I'm in a new location, I can bring up repeater books, see what repeaters are near me, and manually put them into my ham radio and then talk that way.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's like now I want one of these illegal Baofangs.
They've become very expensive.
I had access to whatever it was, but now I feel like I want it.
Yep. Okay.
I bought like 30 of them a few years ago, so if you need one, Nick.
The illegal ones?
Yeah. If they were...
Whatever was on Amazon.
If they're more than like 2 years old. So I will, one other thing about so when we're talking the cheap ones, we're talking about the Baofeng. These were normally like, $30 or less. The electronics are good, but they're not great. They produce a lot of harmonics. So when you are broadcasting at a certain frequency, the electronics involved, and I'm not going to go into details, but it's almost like a musical instrument where if you're playing a note on a flute, there is that specific frequency. But if you had a really sensitive oscilloscope and microphone, you would see a certain distance away from that note, there was a subnote that was coming out. These have poor filtering of those subnotes, so they give a very messy signal that interferes with other objects and radios and generally tick people off. Great for listening, but if you are broadcasting on it, it can be a messy signal and the audio isn't very good and it interferes. Where if you spend, $150, those have very clean signals. They have extra filtering electronics, so you only get that one frequency you want. So that's the main difference.
You pay what you get what you pay for.
Yep.
You get more.
In this case, it's more about not ticking off other people.
Yep.
Yeah. They just won't respond to you if you have a crappy signal.
Yeah. Okay, so let us jump quick to getting the what's involved in getting the license. And so, like I said, if you're just going to listen, you don't need a license. In an extreme emergency, life or death situation, you can broadcast without a license. That's fine. The chances of you knowing what channel, or well, I shouldn't say channel, what frequency to broadcast on is going to be slim. You just don't turn the radio on and start yelling into it and hope someone happens to be on that specific tiny little slice of the big electromagnetic spectrum. That's why you want to know at least what the repeaters in your area are and have those programmed in. So nowadays, there are 3 different levels of licensing. So there is the technician, which is the lowest, easiest level to get with the minimum amount of privileges on the electromagnetic spectrum. There is the general class, which gives you just about full access to everything. And then there is the amateur extra, which is for the super mad scientists, basically, who want to push the boundaries and come up with new stuff. So to get the license, you have to go and take a test. The tests are usually offered by a local ham radio club. There are certain requirements for the test giver has to meet to give the test. So it's all honky-dory in the eyes of the government. The test fee is usually $15. And what's nice about it is for that $15, you can take all 3 tests right in a row. Even if you've only studied and worked for the technician, go ahead and take the general and the amateur extra test too, because they are multiple choice tests and wrong answers don't count against you. So you need 74% or more correct. What's really cool is they tell you in advance what the questions are. So, and then you can just memorize the answers to the questions and fill in the circles. The way it works is, so for the technician level test, there is a block of 428 possible questions, multiple choice. From that, you will be randomly given a booklet that has 30 of those questions in. And then you just answer the questions. For the technician, for the technician class, the lowest level, it's 30 questions out of 428 questions. To get the technician class, you just have to be good at memorizing stuff. And so if I can share the screen again.
Terrible at memorizing. Let
me, here it is. Okay. So if you bring this up. So there is a website, hamexam.org, and they have the complete question pools, but they also have a practice exam. So if you click on that, this is the questions. And then, you just go through and mark, each dot, and then you hit submit. I'm just scrolling quickly through it because it's 35 now. Sorry. Hit grade exam. It'll tell you how many you got right, how many you got wrong. You go through it over and over and over. Each time you retake the test on this practice exam, it gives you a different 35 questions. You do this for a month over your lunch break, you will end up memorizing all the answers. And then you go in and take the test.
And now you have to do this for each of the levels. So there's whatever, hundreds of questions for the technician level. There's similar hundreds of questions.
So, technician, there's 428 question pool.
Oh, gosh.
For the general, there's 462. And for the amateur extra, there is 622.
Gee.
Wow.
And so for the technician, I break it down this way. For a technician, you just have to be able to memorize stuff. For general, you kind of have to understand stuff. You have to be able to do some calculations. There's some math involved. And then for the amateur extra, you already have to be doing stuff. You need a fundamental, electronic engineering level knowledge of radio and everything.
And what
with it. I'm just a technician. I was planning on getting my general class in January of this year, but COVID. So that kind of fell by the wayside. But even with the technician, I can talk to Atlanta. I can talk to the space station if I wanted to. I find for the main reasons I got the ham radio license is for emergency communications, which is generally a local thing. And with the technician, I have everything I need to do that. I was kind of bummed. I did take the general test and the amateur extra test the same day. And I missed the general by like 3 questions. And then the amateur extra, I just like had a, whatever 50 or no, like 25% because there's 4 questions. Yeah. So only through random chance did I get any of those questions.
Oh my
They
God.
were extreme. But once you pass the test, the club that organized the test sends in the paperwork to the government. Government receives it, and then in the mail you get your license and your call sign, and that gives you the privileges then to broadcast on whatever level you of the test you passed.
And then when you just get assigned your call sign, right?
You can do a vanity one, can't you?
Exactly. Yes. So if you want, you can petition the government for a vanity license, even at the technician level. Originally, I was planning on doing that, but I really like KISSBOG. I'm okay with that. So I'm going to stick with that.
I like that. That's
KI5BOG KISSBOG. That is my call sign. People usually find some way of coming up with a word or 2 words from their call sign, or a lot of people, the people I know anyway. I don't know if everyone does.
I can see Nick coming up with something crafty.
Yeah.
It says Wazoo, but backwards.
That could be cool. There is on the FCC website, you submit the call sign and it has a quick, does anyone else have that? And if no one has that, then you can submit it. You can request that your call sign be changed to that. It's a government process, so it can take a while.
Yeah.
But eventually, until it goes into place, you got to keep using your, the call sign they originally assigned you.
Interesting. I always wanted my grandfather's, but his is a 4-digit one. It was KJ1M.
And so the 4-digit, that means he was a general. So when you go from technician to general, you get a new call sign because you have new abilities. So Melanie, you actually got your. Did you get a vanity, or did you just?
Some of these are 5-digit, right?
Yeah, 5 digits.
Yeah, so the technician usually are 5-digit, and then the general and amateur extra are 4-digit.
People trying to come up with one we can get here.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, WA.
WA. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So.
All right, so do it one more time. So the 6-digit is the technician.
The 5-digit.
5-digit.
Yeah, is technician. The 4-digit is general. So technician, the lowest level, biggest letters, and then as you go up, you get the privilege of a shorter call sign. One of the reasons for that, so the technician, it's usually local communications. The general, it's worldwide, and so the ability to talk worldwide, you're relying on atmospheric fluctuations, so they can come and go really quickly. So they decided the people talking around the world should have a shorter call sign, especially if you're doing Morse code. It just shortens the amount of time it takes to get your name out there.
So I'll have to get my general license to be able to get WAZOO.
No, that would be technician. That would be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wait, the technician is the lowest level, right?
Technician is the lowest with 5.
And your
is middle with 4, and amateur extra also goes 4.
But Mark, yours is 6, isn't it?
Oh wait, yeah, it is.
Og.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. You're right.
Okay,
yeah, so technician level.
5, and then the 4 is just really stuff.
Now I'm not sure.
Yeah, 4.
Maybe they dropped off 2.
Class, or general class and extra are 4, and then 5. Maybe 6 for technician as well.
That could be. Yeah.
I don't know.
So Bill McGee has 5. I think Melanie said she was a 5-digit also, and she mentioned that she was a general.
Yeah. So maybe it's the amateur extra that get the 4.
But now also you no longer have to have Morse code is no longer required for technician as well, right?
Yep. And that was, like I said, 2 of the big changes that made getting to the ham radio easy was the arrival of the cheap radios for $30 instead of 200 or 500 or 1,000, and getting rid of the whole Morse code requirement. they would still love for you to learn Morse code. There are apps out there that will teach it to you. There are apps that will listen to the Morse code signal coming over your radio and translate it.
Of course, there are.
English or whatever language you want.
I wish I knew Morse code.
But yeah, it's no longer required, which really makes it super easy then, because you don't have to learn the Morse code tap tap. And I think, and I could be wrong here because since we didn't need to do it, I didn't look into it that much. But I think it was only like 5 words per minute, sending and receiving, maybe 10. It wasn't much, but you need to have the Morse code alphabet memorized. And who has time for that?
Oh my gosh!
So
It'd be a nice skill, but
memorized. So 26 letters.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good Georgia Bushcraft class, Morse code class. I don't think anybody else likes that.
So it's useful if you're in prison, tapping signals to the other prisoners, but they have to know Morse code too. Okay. I noticed it's like 1 after 7.
Yep. We have run out of time. So
really quickly.
Yeah.
If you have any last minute stuff you want to cover, Mark?
So it's cheap to get into it. It's easy to get into it. It's worthwhile getting into it. So for under $50, you can get a radio that will work. And generally, so I mentioned the antenna is actually the key part. Most of the handhelds come with crappy antennas. You want to replace it. There are people who put a $100 antenna on a $20 radio, but for $20 you can get a really good antenna too.
Now, is it all about the length?
Mainly. Anyway, so and one thing you can find, it's really easy to make antennas. So one of the things I got into, and I'll just show it quickly. This is the old dual TV antenna cable that ran from the TVs to the antenna itself. You can make what's called a J-pole antenna out of this for just, you can get this. Actually, I got a whole spool of stuff from an Ace Hardware that no one bought it anymore. So they gave me like 500 feet for $10 and spliced into some just coax cable. And with this, then you string it up in a tree or whatever, and you got super broadcasting powers.
Yes, we need another class on that.
Okay, so
that's cool.
Yeah, lots you can do. And of course, there's websites that will tell you when the space station is going overhead, when the different repeater satellites are going overhead, so you can tap into that. It's very addicting.
For anybody that has a ham radio and doesn't know much about the space station, there is an app called the ISS Spotter that if you get it on your phone, it will pull your location and you can pull up a forecast and it'll tell you exactly when the next pass is, whether it's coming from the northeast or the southwest or wherever it is, what inclination above the horizon it's going to be. So definitely pull that up. I'm excited. I want to try and see if I can get this ping signal or whatever coming from the station. That's cool.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. I feel a lot better about ham stuff now because it was such a weird, mystical thing to me for so long, and I didn't even know where to get started other than this, and a friend programmed it for me, and I still am not comfortable navigating around and doing that stuff. So I need to actually dig into it some more, and I feel like I have a better overall perspective of what it is and how to do it.
Cool.
Thank you so much. We had other people giving you compliments here in the in the comments.
Thank you.
Seriously, that was awesome, man. Thank you.
Oh yeah, Slinky. There's all sorts of really cool antenna designs on the internet and so forth using conduit and cable and coax cable and slinkies and pizza pans and yeah.
Well, we got people here saying they second a class of how to make antennas.
Okay.
We'll postpone that long enough. It'll be a race between Casey and I to see who can get our ham license.
All right.
Don't tempt me with a good time. I'm trying
to it'd be cool, Nick.
Pilot license right now. That's taking too long.
Okay, here's the thing, Nick. You get your license, and then we will, because we live 40 miles apart,
Something like that.
Something like that. Maybe 50. Yeah, because you're down in Cleveland. Probably we should be able to talk to each other during the show live using our radios. So
Nice. We just have to remember to mute so we don't create
so we'll have headphones and stuff.
By the end of this year, Nick, we need to both have our licenses.
I'm about to go on a 2-week road trip to come out and see you, Casey. So
Perfect. So we got to start learning together.
No, you get it
Do
soon.
a ham cram.
let's do it. Then we can talk while we're on the road.
We can chat about things. I don't know what we're talking
I won't
about.
remember. I'll be like, "What's the frequency?" All right.
All right, guys. Well,
Thanks so much, Mark. It was awesome.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Here. You're such a great instructor. We really enjoy it, and you bring a group of fun people with you. So it's good to see part of the tribe here as well. Recognize a lot of names. So
Cool. Hey, tribe. Thanks for coming.
I know you have another class coming up after this. So anybody that is watching, in 54 minutes, Mark's teaching his own class, and I believe you're covering Hollies.
Yeah. So over on the Facebook/Foraging Texas page, 8 to 9 is Merriweather's World every Wednesday evening. Tonight, this episode number 70, is holly trees. The mythology, the science, the uses, all sorts of cool things about a very ancient and mythical tree that is still around today. So should be fun.
And do you cover the Yopon holly? Because I
I
think
will be covering that in particular. Yes.
Yeah, for those people that like caffeine, that will probably be one of your favorite plants. What are you drinking tonight, Mark? Is it a Moscow
Water.
Oh,
I am so hyped up from today
yeah.
that I decided instead of tequila or something like that, let's be good to me.
When for those who don't know, we talked about the Medicine Man Plant Company. Mark got his first shipment in. It's real. It's finally real. There's real stuff for them
It
to
has my signature on it.
look at that.
Focus.
oh,
Yeah.
signed every single one of them. That's awesome.
So,
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next skill series, and we'll see if we get Mark back for a level 2 of the ham radio stuff. We need level 2 foraging.
Absolutely.
That's another time.
all right.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you,
Have a
guys.
good one.
Thank you, Mark.